She was snapped out of her bliss to a wager, opening her cell forcefully, lifting her up. Mr. Dethick wants to see you before he puts you in your final resting place. Come on, move. Another wager yelled, pushing her forward. They walked down a long hallway, then down a staircase, then turned a corner to another long hallway. Precocious thought the walking would never end, but it did end once they reached a room with a label, Mr. Dethick, on the door of the room. In, now, the wager spoke harshly. Precocious moved in and could see Mr. Dethick sitting on a chair made of what must be pure gold. The room grew quiet, and all the wagers looking at Mr. Dethick, obviously waiting for him to speak.
Precocious Boulderson, I have been through your scan files. I cannot find what is so special about you and your family that will make an Opaton appear in the sky.
Mr. Dethick stood and walked straight up to Precocious to examine her closely. I don't know what an Opaton is that you speak of, Precocious said, looking him directly in his face. The man's face was so cold it nearly made her shiver. But I do know of a man who is supposed to defeat you and destroy this prison and defeat your wagers. I believe, Precocious said boldly.
This man you speak of will do no such thing. What you believe is a lie. He was able to break away before, but if and when he returns, I will be ready to put an end to him for good this time.
Look around you, the man snapped his fingers, ordering the men to take Precocious to the window.
Whose name is all over the city? Who is the king of the city? Who reigns all over the city? Who do the wagers answer to? Who is sole authority of the subjects in the city? It is I, Dethick, and it will always be that way, said Mr. Dethick.
You only have power because the man allows it, but soon this will end, Precocious said boldly.
Oh yeah? And how so? Why doesn't he come now? Said Mr. Dethick mockingly. Oh man, where are you? Come now and save your precious Precocious.
Now all the wagers laughed, almost on cue. He will. It's true. His father has promised me.
Enough! His father will do nothing.
Now Mr. Dethick was extremely angry at the mention of the man's father.
That father that you speak of is nothing but a coward, a liar. Dare not speak of him. I will crush him if he appears in this land I rule. Just as I did his son you speak of. I will throw this father in prison as well. I am the only father, do you understand? He said boastfully to Precocious.
She stared him in the eyes, then responded, You know it's true, don't you? You know soon your kingdom will be crushed, and you will be defeated forever, don't you? Precocious asked, unaffected by the man's anger.
This promise that you speak of made to you by this father is nothing more than an illusion you have made yourself believe. You will go to prison and stay there just as everyone else has. There is nothing special about you, Precocious Boulderson. Nothing at all, he said, now sitting back in his big chair. Take her to her final resting place, exceeding a limit. I want all wages owed to me immediately.
And with that, the wagers took her away. Down the long hallways again, this time down dark corridors. The cell she was to go in this time was different from the first. It was now completely dark. You will never get out of this cell, ever, the wager said. You will pay all wages owed, he said, pushing her in the cell. Precocious now stood in complete darkness, afraid. The wager said she'd never get out. And she could not see, not even her hand right in front of her face because of the darkness. She tried to feel around the room and the walls. This cell was much smaller than the old one. Precocious now sat down and cried. No matter what Mr. Dethick said, she would not lose hope in the man or his father, or the promise. Never. Present was immediately taken before Mr. Dethick upon arrival, and sentenced to pay the wager's full wages owed. Presence was immediately taken to a cell and locked in his final resting place. Complete darkness all around, cold and smelly. Presence found himself in disbelief. It was as if it was all some strange dream. He sat there thinking of Precocious and how she must be feeling. He pictured her in a cell like his, and his heart nearly stopped. Even worse was the picture of his wife, Presence, home alone. Presence felt like a complete failure and a complete loser. All of the years of strictness and trying hard to follow all the rules, and he could not manage to keep things in order with his family. Look at them now. Now he was stuck in this jail and would never get out, never to see his wife or daughter. Mr. Dethick and his wagers had hated him more. Mr. Dethick and his wagers, he hated them more than anything and yearned to see Mr. Dethick defeated. But inside, he knew that would never happen. Meanwhile, Mr. Dethick,
Master, sir, there's been another act of defiance. It seems this family is becoming a nuisance. Presence Boulderson, the wife and mother of the misfit, didn't show up to work today. And not just her, 2 others as well.
what?
Collect her immediately before any more misfits join in. We'll go now, immediately.
Mr. Dethick yelled at the wagers. Presence knew the wagers would be here soon. It was 10 after 9, the time she was usually began her shift at the factory. Not just her, Chantier, Ingro as well. When there was a knock at the door, she stood and began to walk to the front door, her 2 longtime friends following close behind. Then Ingro rushed past her and said, "Let me do the honors, Presence." He said, not really asking. He did so telling her. She did not argue with him. When he opened the door, the wager shouted, "You all need to come out and come with me."
Please give her a break. Her family was just taken away, and we came to console her, please,
Ingro protested to no avail.
Rules are rules, and where are your
Badges to be scanned, the wager asked, not caring at all about Presence's condition.
We will no longer answer to you. We will not be scanned anymore,
Ingro said and struck the wager right in his jaw. Ingro, no! Presence yelled. It was like a replay of Present, her husband, all over again. Grab him, the wager said, and 6 wagers rushed Ingro, tackling him to the ground. Now Chantier jumped on one of the wagers' back and began striking him. She was also rushed by a group of wagers. The sight was grueling to Presence, who could only watch. She could never imagine striking a wager like the 2 of them. All she could do was yell, "Stop, please! Just take us away! Please don't hurt them!" But the wagers did not care. They were angry, and one of them struck Presence, knocking her out cold. She passed out immediately. The wagers picked her up and into a wagon. When Presence woke up, she found herself in a cold, smelly cell. She wondered how long she'd been out. She felt her face, and it was swollen in her cheek, and her eye was half open. It was tightening as she tried to open it. Completely swollen and painful, she couldn't believe the wager actually struck her. She hadn't tried to fight like Ingro and Chantier. She stood up and walked to the door of the cell, the floor ice cold. She began to bang on the cell door. "Please, someone let me out! My face hurts!" she yelled, banging nonstop. And after a few moments, a couple of wagers appeared on the other side of the cell. The door was opened. The wagers did not bother to speak to her or to listen to her complain about her painful jaw and eye. They simply grabbed her and began to walk her to Mr. Dethick's office for her sentencing. Mr. Dethick was very swift and quick in his judging of Presence. The usual. She had reached her limit, and her debt or her wages were great, and she was to remain in prison until her full wages were paid, which would be indefinitely. And off she was whisked away to a dark, cold cell of her own, one in which she would never get out of. Ingro and Chantier followed and were sentenced. The same fate. All wages were required to be paid in full.